Hey everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Raccoon Club podcast. Well, he's done it again. Donald Trump has decided to go off script and go off message, and to reveal his true colors and his true feelings about the world. Today, he's decided to direct his outburst at Colin Kaepernick, a guy who, as you know from my previous podcast on the subject, someone who I consider a hero, actually, someone who I consider to be at sort of the epicenter of an important moment in American history. And I sincerely believe that. I don't think that what he's doing right now is minor in any way. I don't think what he's doing right now is going to be overlooked by history. I think people are going to look back and go, he was the start of something important. But to take a step back, if you're not familiar with who Colin Kaepernick is a football player, a former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers for the NFL, who, after a series of police shootings of unarmed black men, decided to protest. And his means of protest was to take a knee or to kneel during the national anthem. Now, I had a whole podcast about this, and you're more than welcome to go listen to it, but I'll summarize really quickly. Taking a knee is the least offensive thing you can do. It is literally a passive act. Why anyone would be insulted by this is absolutely beyond me. But white people and white men have lost their fucking minds on this, and they have made Colin Kaepernick the focal point of their frustration on this. Again, I simply don't understand this. It's a completely passive protest. He's not yelling, he's not screaming, he's not blocking traffic, he's not burning buses. He's simply taking a knee before the start of a game. So it's not even during the two whistles, the whistle to whistle of the game. It impacts the game in literally no way. Yet somehow his taking a knee has triggered all the conservative snowflakes out there. In my previous podcast, I also mentioned how the national anthem is a relatively new thing in American history. It is not nearly as precious. It is not nearly as sacred as conservatives would lead us to believe. But again, that was a separate podcast. Tonight, I want to talk about what Donald Trump has decided to say about Colin Kaepernick. So tonight, Donald Trump was in Huntsville, Alabama, supposedly to be part of a campaign rally in support of the senatorial bid of a fellow Republican by the name of Luther Strange. Fuck me, you cannot make that name up, Luther Strange. But of course, Donald Trump being Donald Trump decided to veer off message, and for whatever idiotic reason, decided to go after Colin Kaepernick. And he decides to say the following thing. I'm quoting him. "Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, 'Get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out. He's fired. He's fired.'" The sad thing is not that he said it, because we know he's going to say stupid stuff. The sad thing is that the audience that he was giving this speech to applauded wildly. And that is, again, just so disheartening. But it shouldn't be surprising that a group full of Alabama white men and women applauded the President of the United States for going after a black man. I mean, he's such a fucking dick. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say about this guy. What else can we say? We've analyzed him. We've tried to make sense of him. He's so obsessed with himself, and he's so obsessed with his own ego. He actually was blaming the NFL's drop in ratings to himself. He actually said people are more interested in watching him than watching football. You cannot be more childish than this guy. And not just that, but he seems incapable of understanding. He has this sort of primal need to be the alpha male. He has this sort of primal need to project a sense of strength. So he's going after the NFL because the NFL recently has passed some new rules that penalize players that hit too hard. And of course they would do that. And of course the NFL would make those rules because of CTE, the concussion issue. A lot of NFL players are getting brain damage because they're getting hit too hard. And of course, Mr. Tough Guy, who's never played a fucking game of football in his life, who's never taken a hit as hard as a running back can give in his life, decides to say the following. Today, if you hit too hard, 15 yards, throw him out of the game, he said while mimicking the act of an official throwing a penalty flag. They're ruining the game, right? They're ruining the game. It's hurting the game. That quote is from a Washington Post article from tonight. For a white president to pick on an African-American male who is trying to protest police brutality against African Americans, something that is statistically proven, something that we all know happens, something that keeps happening again and again and again, is just insane to me. I'm beside myself. What is wrong with this guy? And for a group of Trump supporters applauding that tells you everything you need to know about Donald Trump and his supporters, tells you everything you need to know about the Republican Party, tells you everything you need to know about modern day conservatism. This is it. This is as good as it gets for these losers. They're a bunch of fucking troglodytes. They are something we need to figure out how to remove from the gene pool. I think it's time for us to admit that Donald Trump isn't just childish, isn't just uneducated, isn't just impulsive, isn't just rude and crass and mean. I think it's time for us to admit that Donald Trump is an asshole. I think that's the only way for us to make sense of this guy any longer. There are people who still think that Donald Trump is playing three-dimensional chess, that somehow he's trying to outwit his opponents. He's not trying to outwit anybody. He's just a fucking asshole. That's the only way his behavior makes any sense. He is genetically, in his deep fiber of a being, is just a fucking asshole. What president who's supposed to live up to the so-called dignity of the office tells the NFL to fire a guy for peacefully protesting during the national anthem? There's no rule in the NFL that says you have to stand up during the anthem. The playing of the national anthem in NFL games is a relatively new phenomenon. It hasn't been there forever. The playing of the national anthem during sports games in general is a relatively new phenomenon. As the President of the United States, he's supposed to defend the First Amendment. He's supposed to defend freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of conscience. What is the bloody point of being the President of the United States if the First Amendment you fuck up? You can't even make it past one. One is too difficult for you. He is truly the worst. He is the worst amongst us. Donald Trump truly represents the worst in America. He is like the distillation of everything that's bad and ugly and mean about this country. And unfortunately, he's president of the United States. And he also happens to be a massive fucking asshole. And we have to put up with him until Mueller can figure out how to throw this guy in jail. And again, here's a prediction. The Republicans won't say anything against him. Paul Ryan won't say anything. Mitch McConnell won't say anything. Lindsey Graham won't say anything. John McCain won't say anything. No one will say anything against this guy. No one will check him. No one will walk up and say, dude, stop being a dick. Go do your job and leave everyone else alone. In my previous podcast about Colin Kaepernick, I was talking about how surprised I was that the protest that he's leading has not spread further amongst the NFL. It has spread. Other players are taking a knee during the national anthem, but it hasn't really spread to the length that it's become truly universal, that you see it absolutely everywhere. I hope now African-American players and, quite frankly, white players of the NFL now begin to understand what Colin Kaepernick is up against. Now begin to understand why Colin Kaepernick's protest is so important. It's because when we talk about institutionalized racism, you're seeing it in action in Donald Trump. He's the president of the United States, and he's telling people that a football player should be fired because he's protesting police brutality. I hope to God come Sunday that every single player in the NFL is taking a knee. I hope to God on Sunday that every single player in the NFL is protesting. But again, I can only hope. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Raccoon Club podcast. Catch you next time.